Comics are home to some good artwork from very great artists, and I mean a lot of very great artists. Whether that be in the pages of the adventure itself or the cover, realistic or stylized, grand or subtle, no two artists draw the same. But in my time experiencing these wonderful pieces, one artist has stood out to me like no other. One artist's work captivated me with its marvellous grandeur so significantly that I would like to analyse and share my thoughts on their work. This one artist has been used as a marketing strategy, something I've never seen before from any other artist. This one artist has won countless of awards and has a legacy almost insurmountable in the world of comics. So join me today as we take a look into the life and work of this one artist, who goes by the name of Alex Ross. Alex Ross's interest in art began from as early as age 3, with heavy influence from Spider-Man and also his mother, who worked as a commercial artist. Later, his vision for his work would shift to realistic, influenced by the likes of Andrew Loomis and Norman Rockwell. Looking at Ross's later, most iconic works, it's clear to see the influence from both Loomis and Rockwell. The characters in Loomis's art are incredibly realistically lit, and even sometimes harshly, something that is a staple of Ross's style. As for Rockwell, the lighting and general presentation of his art was very dramatic, drawing the viewer to the subject, something that Ross would later use to great effect. Ross then followed in the footsteps of his mother once more, studying at the American Academy of Art in Chicago at age 17. This also led him further down the realistic rabbit hole, with Ross discovering the hyper-realistic quality of the likes of J.C. Leyendecker and Salvador Dali. To be completely honest, I think Ross must have studied a different Salvador Dali, because I don't understand how this can be considered hyper-realistic. During his studies, Ross also developed the idea to paint comic books, something that obviously goes without saying is quite unusual not only for the time but even today. Ross would then graduate at age 20. Ross's first ever comic book work came in 1990 with Terminator Burning Earth, with Ross providing both cover and page art. And man, is it good. First of all, this might genuinely be one of the greatest comic covers I've ever seen. First of all, with utilising franchise iconography with the metal X-ray skeleton effect, and also second of all, just an incredible depiction of Ross's style and straight away introducing you as to what you're about to get into, especially with how realistic the woman has been painted, which is a hallmark of Ross's style. Now, as first times go, this comic is really impressive, but not without its faults. First of all, Ross seems to want to achieve dramatic and cool lighting on his characters, no matter the logic. In this frame, for example, the front character's face is lit almost straight on, the middle character's face is lit slightly to the right, but still you can see a bit of the left, and then the last guy is just completely dramatically lit from the right. This goes without saying and just makes absolutely zero sense. Additionally, later in Ross's career, especially with DC, Ross would utilise text with no background at all, either black or white, simply because cartoon speech bubbles are a bit jarring, especially against such realistic background, and take away from the striking artwork. Now, unlike most comic artists, with Ross's artwork, Ross very rarely just uses plain blocks of colour, instead blending as many different tones of colour to achieve the most realistic shadows and lighting possible. Ross reserves use of blocky colours for dramatic lighting, be it harsh lights or complete darkness, in which their effect is maximised because it looks so unusual to see such detailed characters have an absence of information, which effectively highlights the drama. Ross typically, like I said, with the blocks of colour, even in dark moments, paints with light enough tones to discern every single detail, which is incredibly realistic for humans, as once our eyes have adjusted to darkness, we can see pretty much everything. Despite Terminator Burning Earth taking place a lot of the time in either dark environments or nighttime, Ross still uses this rule here and makes his artwork once again achieve that almost hyper-realism effect. This refusal to leave information blank is also a hallmark of the likes of J.C. Leyendecker, Andrew Loomis and Norman Rockwell, so we can clearly see how they have moulded Ross's style. As I mentioned earlier, this is in complete contrast to traditional comic book artists who would use just simple blocky tones, especially when printing colours was more difficult, such as the case of John Romita Sr., who was actually one of Ross's earlier inspirations in life. In 1996, after already having worked with DC on a comic called Spectre, Alex Ross collaborated with writer Mark Waid to produce what is arguably his most famous, most iconic, and greatest contribution to the world of comic books: Kingdom Come. The story of Kingdom Come takes place in the future, where older members of the Justice League find themselves conflicted over how to handle a new generation of reckless and irresponsible crime fighters. Ross paints each page with gouache painting, a technique similar to watercolour but produces more opaque and solid colours, a decision most likely made to further emphasise the dramatic grandeur of Ross's work and the larger-than-life essence he wanted to capture, making sure that every colour was perfect. Kingdom Come's story is iconic, with many considering it DC's greatest, thanks mainly to writer Mark Waid. That's not to say, however, that Ross's artwork isn't integral to the comic's success. Not only does each page look like it could be hung in the Louvre thanks to Ross's style, but also creative choices such as the character design of the likes of Superman. Superman's Kingdom Come design is so iconic that it is featured in many of the characters' appearances afterwards, such as the Arrowverse's Crisis on Infinite Earths event. Additionally, James Gunn has chosen to use the Kingdom Come logo instead of the standard S logo of Superman for the Superman of the DCU, because that's just how good the design is. However, Alex Ross's contribution to DC, and even its movies, doesn't end there. In fact, there's one more example where Alex Ross's work inspired to a much greater extent than any TV show or movie that I've mentioned so far. $660 million. That is how much money in the box office the Justice League movie made when it released in 2017, despite, in my opinion, it being absolute garbage. To put that into context, James Gunn's new Superman movie only just managed to scrape past the 600 million mark. Now, cast your mind back to the marketing of Superman. Me personally, I couldn't get away from posters, trailers, cast interviews, collaborations. So, if they were doing all of that to rake in a respectable 600 million, then what did Justice League do? Surely some spectacular viral marketing or throwing money at some big ad agency in the hopes of getting it in front of as many eyes as possible. And I mean, sure, that is probably what they did. I mean, why don't we just take a look at some of the posters? Okay, and hang on. That looks familiar to me.
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
What do you mean you've seen this? It's brand new.
Yeah, well, I saw it on a rerun.
So, Warner Brothers marketing material for this film, including the main poster, was just copied Alex Ross art. Specifically this, in which, as we can see, the Justice League are depicted against a black background with harsh lighting from above. I mean, we can clearly see that they replicated this as close as possible, even down to the poses and the facial expressions the characters are pulling. Personally, I love this. It's a great way to honour one of their, greatest artists. It also just looks really cool, very dramatic, and comic booky. I actually think that, in my opinion, this might be one of the greatest marketing strategies I've ever seen for a superhero movie. It honours the source material and makes it feel like a grand epic, like you're witnessing this group of glorious characters with such heavenly lighting. I mean, this even kind of makes me want to watch the movie again, which, pretty impressive feat if you ask me. This, however, isn't Ross's only involvement with the Justice League. In fact, just shy of 20 years prior to the release of this film, Ross collaborated with some of DC's most legendary writers on some pretty legendary comics featuring this iconic group of characters. Paul Dini is also a man of great legacy at DC Comics. Dini is a producer and writer. Some of his greatest feats include creating Harley Quinn having written for animated shows like Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, and Justice League Unlimited, and also having written the stories for Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Arkham City. So, a collaboration between Ross and Dini has got to be pretty good, right? Right? Yeah. It's good. Real good, in fact. Let me tell you why. Dini and Ross collaborated to produce a series of short one-off stories about DC's most iconic characters, such as Superman, Peace on Earth, Batman, War on Crime, Shazam, Power of Hope, Wonder Woman, Spirit of Truth, as well as 2 Justice League stories in JLA, Secret Origins, and JLA, Liberty and Justice. Altogether, these will be collected in a hardcover titled The World's Greatest Superheroes. The art in these is quite obviously phenomenal, with Ross especially shining at the characters' facial expressions, something very important to help convey the story, especially as they're all quite short. Paul Dini's writing is also incredible, just like his other works. In Peace on Earth, he perfectly captures Superman's almost childlike naivety with his unquestionable faith in humankind's compassion and kindness, which is wrapped up very nicely in the setting of Christmas, as well as depicting the major influence on Superman that Pa Kent had. The rest of the stories also capture great understanding of the characters, providing entertaining, globetrotting but short adventures. Whilst JLA Secret Origins is just a 30-page collection of one-page origins for every member of the JLA, Liberty and Justice sees the Justice League facing a deadly alien virus whilst also facing public mistrust. Ross also worked on another Justice League series called Justice, written by Ross and another writer called Jim Kruger. Justice sees the Justice League's greatest villains actually help the world, such as solving world hunger, but is all in an attempt to discredit and destroy the Justice League. Whilst not as highly praised as Ross's other works like Kingdom Come, it's still definitely worth reading in my opinion. Justice would be the final time that Ross provided primary art for a major DC comic as of today, but not his final comic entirely. Notable work of his after this include Dynamite Entertainment comics, such as Project Superheroes, Avengers Invaders, Kirby Genesis, as well as lots of cover art for DC and Marvel, as well as Marvel itself, notably Fantastic Four Full Circle. Full Circle sees Ross adopt a much more classical comic book approach to the art, specifically in the colours. Ross uses much more abstract colours with the lighting, specifically those of the 60s, when print limitations with the ink meant you had to use more primary colours. This adds a whole new layer of charm to the art, and in my opinion, makes it one of his most unique works. This was also most likely a decision inspired by Jack Kirby, the original creator of the Fantastic Four. It has been 3 years since the release of Full Circle, and since then, nothing new has been announced or released from Ross, but his legacy in comics is still immense. Ross won 10 Eisner Awards and honed an art style so incredibly unique it is almost impossible to replicate, not only due to effort and time, but also sheer skill, clever understanding of lighting, and absolutely brilliant ability with the paintbrush. All in all, Alex Ross will be remembered as one of the greatest comic book artists of all time, up there with the likes of Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, and even some of his original inspirations such as George Perez, John Romita Sr., and Neil Adams. Thanks for watching.